Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off because today I'll be reviewing as well as sharing a bit of a how to play of Crusader Kingdoms, the War for the Holy Land from Worthington Publishing. So is this a light complexity war game that you'd be walking across a blazing hot desert in order to add to your collection? Or is this game designed about as successful as the Children's Crusade? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I am going to be reviewing Crusader Kingdoms from Worthington Publishing in just a moment. But first, I do want to remind you that if you end up liking this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because not only will it let you know when I upload videos such as this, I'll also tell you when my live stream, The Daily Dope, airs right here on YouTube, Monday through Thursday nights, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. All right, so I'm digging into Crusader Kingdoms, the War for the Holy Land, which I am just going to refer to as Crusader Kingdoms from here on out. It is from Worthington Publishing. It's designed by Jesus Peralta, who also provides the artwork and graphic design for the game. This is for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, plays in about an hour, and does carry an MSRP of $75. Do want to mention that the fine folks over at Worthington Publishing did provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else from the Gaming Gang has received any sort of other compensation for me to share my thoughts about this game. So without further ado, let's swing on over to the other camera because I have Crusader Kingdoms set up for a 4-player game. So one of the interesting aspects about Crusader Kingdoms, and I'm going to apologize right up front because I know at some point I am going to refer to this as Crusader Kings. Keeping my fingers crossed that I don't, but it is possible because I play a lot of Crusader Kings 2 and a little bit of 3. I've played around with 3 a little bit, but that's a completely different game. This is a tabletop game. Those are PC games. So the premise is that you have the various different crusades. So you've got the 3 crusades, 3 major crusades covered in this game. So as a 1-player game, you're going to play 1 crusade. You're going to play the first crusade, and you actually play against a bot. You're playing as a Christian crusaders against a Muslim bot. In a 2-player game, interestingly enough, and you're going to actually use the board on the other side of this, which I'll do my best. I'll try to remember to show you that board when we finish up with a bit of the how to play and things like that. But with the 2-player game, surprisingly enough, it's not the Christians versus Muslims. It is 2 players representing the Christian Crusaders, once again, against a Muslim bot. With a 3-player game, it's 2 Christian players against 1 Muslim player, and in the 4-player game, as I've got set up here, you're looking at broken down into 2 and 2. But we have the first, the second, and the third crusade. So that's kind of interesting how we've got those in the same board game, and depending on the number of players, is going to determine the crusade that you'll actually play. So as I mentioned, I've got this set up for 4 players. We'll kind of tour the board a little bit. So this is a card-driven game. Not in the respects as, say, a GMT card-driven game would be, or maybe, say, like a coin game from GMT as well. But the cards do really pretty much provide all the impetus for the action in the game. So we've got a Crusader Christians deck. We've got the Muslims deck over here. For the players, we have castles or fortifications, really. We also have garrison tokens here as well. And we've got the two different sides here. So we've got the Crusader shield, which represents the Christians. And then we also have the shield here for the Muslims. We also have custom dice. We've got 8 custom dice. These are very cool dice. They are not cut. They are laser printed. And as you can see, we've got half of the die faces have the Crusader symbol, and then we have the Muslim symbol. On the other half, you're going to be rolling these dice quite a lot because they are going to determine what happens during battles. So we've got the deck here. We've got discard section. We've got our castle pool, and we have our garrison pool. We also have our card bonus. So we have anywhere from 2 to -2. And what will happen is if you gain a region, you're going to add 1 to your card pool for the next turn. There are 3 turns in the game. If you lose a region, you're going to subtract 1. Now, these are not permanent penalties. These are just for the following turn. So as an example, if you had lost, let's say the red player here had lost a region, then the following turn, they're going to have a -1 card penalty. So let's say that was from the first to the second turn. But once that's taken place, it's going to go back to 0. At the end of the game, this will help also determine victory points too for that final turn. As I mentioned, there are 3 turns. So here we've got a map of the Middle East that was the focus of the Crusades. We have the Mediterranean here, which I actually like to use this area to put cards out that have an ongoing effect on that turn. So we have the different regions, and you'll see that we have these shields here. These shields will represent the defensive modifier, basically, for this region. So if we have the castle, that means that is controlled by that faction. If it's empty, then that means that is an independent kingdom, which can be attacked. Because in the 4-player game that I have shown here, you can actually have the Christians attack each other. You can have the Muslims attack each other. So it is essentially every person, every gamer for themselves in the 4-player game. In a 3-player game, the Christian players, remember I mentioned it's 2 Christian players versus a Muslim player, they cannot attack each other. Of course, in a 2-player game, it's cooperative. So a lot of different wrinkles to how this game plays depending on the number of players. I do like that. I think that's very cool. So essentially, we've got this area, the different regions here as well. We see that on the Muslim side of the board, it's pretty much a mirror image of what we had on the Christian side. So we've got the Muslim deck, we've got the castle pool for both players, garrison pool for both players, as well as their card bonuses. There's a different number of these, and the reason why is because I wanted to show off the cool plastic insert we get with the game. I wanted to leave some pieces in here so you could take a peek. So, I mean, it's a little flimsy, but it's better than just, having nothing or a big baggie, right? So your dice can go in here, your cards can go in here as well. One thing I do want to mention, the component quality throughout is really nicely done. I really think Worthington has done a very, very nice job with the component quality here. The wooden pieces here are nice. The dice are cool. The only thing you could possibly ask for the dice would be that they were cut, but still, they are laser printed. They will hold up to gameplay. The cards have a nice linen finish as well, so that's very cool. Definitely like that. Also, so let's take a look real quick at the rules. And my copy came with 2 sets of rules, which I thought was awesome because that allows me to have an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to play my best friend, Elliot Miller, in Crusader Kingdoms. And I could say, hey, here's the rules. Why don't you look over these rules before we play next week? Of course, in this time of pandemic. It could be next year or 2022. But anyway, so we've got the rules here. The rules are very short. As I mentioned, this is a light complexity war game. It is not difficult to wrap your head around the gameplay itself, at least especially the core mechanics of the game. Because as I mentioned, the game does play a little bit differently based on how many players you have. But 16 pages of rules, and there's lots and lots of images in here. So really easy peasy. All right, so how are you going to actually play Crusader Kingdoms? So you're going to set up, and the board itself is going to tell you how to set up the game. So here we've got section here. It shows 4 players. Probably can't make that out, but it's going to tell you the 4 players, who the factions are, and what the turn order is, because the turn order is based on this section here. It's going to tell you what color is represented by that faction, what regions they're going to start off with that have a castle. I feel weird calling it a castle because they're really not castles. They'd be fortifications. But regardless, the game calls them castles. So then it also tells us what our starting hand of cards will be and what our card, basically our starting card, I don't want to say limit because there really isn't a hand limit, but the number of cards you're going to begin your turn with in hand. And of course, depending on the number of players, that is going to change. So essentially, let's take the Christian deck here. And even though they actually go second in the turn, it says we take 8 cards. So we're going to deal out 8 cards. So essentially, in a 2-player game, you would actually be dealing out 16 cards because each player is going to have 8 cards. So the cards are broken up into 3 different types. And let's see if we've got all 3. Well, we got an event, we've got a response, and we got troops. Perfect. So as I mentioned, there are 3 different cards. So we have event cards, we have response cards, and we have troop cards. So essentially, when it is your turn in the round, right? Or your round of the turn, I should say. It's your turn with your round. That makes sense, right? So when it's your turn in the round, you have certain actions that are available to you. And of course, this a little depends on how many players you're playing with. But with 3 or 4 players, you can attack, which you actually will use troop cards to do. And I'll show you how you'd pull that off. You can have an incursion, which essentially means that you're going to roll a die and you're going to choose a region that is adjacent to a region that you have. And you're going to roll a die. And if your symbol comes up, right? So if I'm the Christian player, I'm looking for these shields. If I'm the Muslim player, I'm looking for these shields. If I roll a die, of course, that wouldn't be good. So if, as a Christian player, I could say I want to have an incursion into Damascus. So if I'm successful, then that player has to discard one of their cards from their hand randomly. So you've got the incursions. We also have, you can play an event. These are event cards here. So a lot of times these event cards are going to actually be in play for the entire turn. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes it's just a one-time thing. You can also discard, because remember, you've got, in this example, 8 cards for each player. At the end of the turn, you might still have cards in hand. You have to carry those over into the next turn. If you don't want those cards, then you're going to have to discard. The final thing you can do is you can pass. So those are the 5 available actions that you can play. So as an example here, let's say it would be let's say the red player. So they say, okay, they're going to play Templars. And it says You can choose between increasing your card bonus by 1 or reducing the card bonus from all Muslim players by 1. So I'd get to make that choice. That's my event. And that's what I did during that round. And then it would move on to the next player, then the next player, and the next player. Then it comes back to me. So let's say, once again, I am the red player. Now, this time out, I'm going to attack. I don't have a lot of troop cards, so that's not too good. But let's say I want to attack, and we're going to go from Antioch to Aleppo, and I'm going to attack with Armed Pilgrims, which has a value of 3, and Turcopoles, which has a value of 2. So that gives me 5. So that means I'm going to roll 5 dice. So I am going to be rolling 5 dice, and I am looking to roll the Christian shields. No, not bad. I got 3 out of the 5. So I would have 3. Now, the defender here in Aleppo gets to roll 3 dice. Now, if they had a garrison here, and there are ways for you to add garrisons to your regions, you would also get an extra die. But we've got 3. They're going to roll 3 dice. They need all Muslim symbols to come up, which they don't. They're all Christian. And that is sometimes how this game's dice will roll. Trust me, especially when you're playing solitaire. So in a situation like this, we would win the attack. This castle is removed. It's added back to the castle pool. And then the red player would take control of Aleppo. And that would be it. Then it would be the next person's round. Then we just keep going around until everybody passes. So it is possible, like for an example here, whoops, as I just knocked them out of their region. So as you can see here, I've got a bunch of events in my hand of cards. So I would probably end up keeping some of these, possibly. So I also have the response too. So I could sit there and be like, okay, well, I play a couple more events, and let's say I'm down to these cards, and I could say, okay, I pass. So I pass. That does not mean I am out of that turn. I can come back in. So you will see players will pass to see what the other players end up doing and then continue on. And then you'll just continue until everyone passes for their action, and that will end the turn. You're going to move on to the next turn. You're going to take all your discards as well as cards that were in play, right? So we might have some of these events that sit here and allow, like it's usually a bonus die to your forces. Anything that was in play for that turn is going to go into being shuffled up, and that's going to create your draw deck once again. We'll point out there are not a ton of cards for each side, so you are going to see these cards over and over again. So I find that it's more noticeable when you're playing a solitaire game, because it's kind of like, wow, man, I have had that card like every turn. It's like, what's going on here? So as an example, kind of give you, let's continue with that. So we would have the green player here. They would end up only having 7 cards. So let's say, as an example, maybe they had 2 cards that they held on to. So they would draw 5 more cards. Once everybody has their new cards, everybody makes sure that this returns back to 0. All right, so you're going to continue on until you've played 3 complete turns. Now, an important aspect to keep in mind is we're going to use the green player as an example here. Let's say this was the situation and we're moving into turn 3. I'm just using the die here because The game comes with a die, and the die is actually used for solitaire. So rather than using a garrison token, I just figured, I'll just throw the die onto this to mark it. The green player is not eliminated from play, even though they no longer have any sort of strongholds on the board. They're not eliminated. But the only thing that they can do is they can attack into one of their starting regions. So, as an example, here we had Aleppo, we had Edessa. So the green player could say, okay, on their turn, they're attacking. And of course, once again, they would have to utilize troop cards in order to make an attack. But if they're successful in their attack, then they would be back on the board. And once again, as a reminder, in a 4-player game, the Christians can attack Christians and Muslims can attack Muslims. It's every gamer for themselves. So what's going to happen is at the end of your third turn, well, there's an immediate victory condition, but it happens very rarely, is if everyone has, I should say everyone, if a single player has all of their castles in play, it's an instant win. I'll remove that as an example. So that would be an instant victory for the red player. Like I said, you're not going to see that too often. So what you will do is at the end of the third turn, whoever has the most castles on the board is determined as the winner or winners. You can't have kind of draws. What we sort of did is that we actually used this. We left it at the end of the third turn and used this as well as, so for an example, that's a bonus castle. That would be a negative castle, just as kind of a tiebreaker. And essentially, that is how you would play the 4-player Crusader Kingdoms. Now, one thing I do want to point out, we had the response cards. So the response cards are normally played for an attack. When an attack is made, you're going to respond to that, and it might change something as far as, so here we have regroupment. After an attack you participate in, you may retrieve to your hand one of your participating troop cards. So this is when you make an attack. Sometimes we have, it's a response to someone else playing a card as well. So there aren't tons of response cards, but there's some interesting stuff in here, like surprise sortie. The attacker must remove a troop card of his choice from those attacking the castle. Got a defensive battle, add a die to the defense of the castle in response to an attack. And there's some other bonuses you can add as well. Just kind of give you an idea of some of these cards here. Truce. Turkomans. So when you're attacking, you're going to be playing your troop cards. So like if you noticed when I played the red player there, they ended up with just a couple of troop cards. Well, that can happen. If you end up with only, a few troop cards, that's all you can use during your turn as far as attacking. All right, I'm going to clear some of this stuff off real quick because I do want to show you the other side of this board. And I'm actually going to have to show you it sideways because it's actually not laid out like this. It's laid out like this. So let me flip this on over to kind of show you, kind of give you a bit of an idea of what this board looks like. So this is for the solitaire player, as well as the 2-player cooperative game. So you're going to have cards up here for the Muslim bot, which essentially does just use the Muslim deck of cards. And you'll notice that there are some areas here that are marked off. So we do have the Everything is the same, except for we have these areas that have a number in a circle, which is essentially, it's based on the bot. It's what the Muslim bot player is going to do. And then we also have victory points. So when you're playing the solitaire game or even the two-player cooperative game, you're going to track victory points at the end of the game for the regions that you control. And inside the book, it's going to tell you, it's like, for an example, 10 or fewer victory points is a defeat. And that would probably be the last Crusade. 11 to 14 is a marginal victory. 15 or more is a victory. And I just wanted to kind of show off this board as well. This is one of the aspects I really do like about Crusader Kingdoms is the various ways and various crusades you can play. It's just a little strange that there isn't a two-player game where it's Christian player, Muslim player. It's a two-player co-op, which is fine. Like I said, it's just a little strange. And that is essentially pretty much how you play Crusader Kingdoms. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I will share my final thoughts and give this baby a review score. So this is the second game I've had an opportunity to review from Worthington Publishing. And this is the second game that I really like. Oh, so close to giving it a higher score than I did, but I'll explain my madness at the end of the review. I love the fact that you can have 1 to 4 players. I love that we've got solitaire gameplay built into it. I do like the fact in a 4-player game, it's kind of every gamer for themselves. Because to be honest, if you were just playing Christians versus Muslims, I think that would be a little wonky. Now, granted, a 3-player game is exactly how it plays out. The Christian players can't attack each other. But the Muslim player has some advantages in the 3-player, more cards available to them. So I really do like it. I think the component quality is excellent. It's very easy to learn how to play. It is really a light complexity war game. Thematically, it's pretty good. But I mean, the reality is it could be anything. I mean, we could be fighting over an alien landscape. So it's not dripping in theme. But that said, the artwork, the map, everything else, very cool. So it is thematic. So I like that as well. You know, I got to be honest. It says it's for ages 14 and up. This is another game that I would say, 11, 12-year-old players could easily get into this game. This makes for a nice gateway game if you'd like to introduce some players out there to conflict simulations, war games. I will mention those growlers out there who are really into meaty monster games. Probably not going to ring their bells because it is very light and it is not getting into the nuts and bolts. So essentially the troops, the various different troops are just a title of what they are and a number. So, there isn't a lot of variety there as well. So real heavy war gamers, nah, I don't know. Unless once again, you're using it as a gateway to bring people into wargaming. All right, all in all, I was so close to giving this a 9 out of 10. So close to giving it a 9 out of 10. I give it an 8.5 out of 10, essentially for 3 reasons. So first off, at $75, I think this is a little pricey. Yes, I do understand war games tend to be higher MSRP because it is a niche. I say it all the time. Wargaming is a niche of a niche hobby. So I do understand that. Like I said, I think it's just a touch high. If this was, say, $65, I would be like, yeah. If you like light war games, Even if you want a cool solitaire game that you can bust out, finish up in about an hour or less, depending on how poorly you end up doing, I would say, oh, most definitely. So, little pricey. It is possible that these games will play out rather similarly. I have not played it enough to determine if that would be the case or not. And part of that is because there's not a ton of variety in the cards. I could have seen maybe another 10, maybe 15 cards in each deck just to kind of shake things up a bit. As I mentioned before, playing solitaire, you can be like, wow, I got this card again? Jeez. How many times are you going to see the same card? It does happen. So, as I mentioned, oh, so close to a 9 out of 10. But then again, 8.5 out of 10 is still a very, very solid recommendation. I really do like Crusader Kingdoms and can seriously recommend it for you as well. All right, that's it for this review. As I mentioned before, if you like this video, please be sure to give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And of course, ding that bell, because not only will it let you know when I upload other videos along the lines of this review, it'll also tell you when my live stream, The Daily Dope, airs right here on YouTube, Monday through Thursday nights, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. All right, so let's wrap this up as I have, unfortunately, during all my videos in the midst of this never-ending pandemic. Here's hoping all of you out there are being smart and staying safe. See you next time. Oh, you're still here. Well, once again, thank you very much for watching this video. And of course, if you'd like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, click right here. And of course, if you want to see one of the latest episodes of the Daily Dope, click right on up here. And if you want to roll the dice, take your chances, see what YouTube thinks you might like from the channel, give a click right here. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and I'll see you next time.